Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Welcome, Keith. It's nice to see you. Nice to be doing this with you.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, amazing. It's actually quite a unusual setup. When we were initially scheduling this webinar, I was supposed to be doing that from Europe, and believe me, I was so happy to realize yesterday as I landed in SF that thanks God this is 9 a.m. PT time, not like 6 or something. So I'm guess, yeah, that's good. What time is on your side? You're on the other coast, right?
Yeah, it's noon here, so I've had
Nice.
half of my coffee that I will have today.
Yeah, I'm sort of going through it as you can see. We'll see where I end up by the time we wrap this up. Um, I'm genuinely excited for this webinar. I've been very long around React Native community, and I think I sort of went through all the different stages of Expo as a sort of company, starting as exponent and different stages from more sort of Expo Go centric approach, up to the point where I think it is a good question to answer what is Expo really these days. I mean, with all those services, it becomes even more appealing and easier than ever to adapt it. That's why I'm genuinely excited about this because there is so much to unbox here, not just, install this package and you're done, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm excited to talk about it too. This is the how to migrate to Expo is the number one conversation I have in the hallways at various React Native conferences. People, I'm just walking to go get a snack during the break time, and someone grabs me like, "I'm trying to migrate my company to Expo. How do I do it? Where do I get started? My app is 5 years old, and we're not sure where to stick this in here." And like the really good news is more so than ever, adopting Expo is all about migrating or gradual migration. You can adopt whatever pieces you want. Really, like, what is an Expo app? Like, it's an app, it's a React Native app that has the Expo package installed fundamentally. And then what you do with it after that, whether it's EAS Build, EAS Update, CNG, all these other things, that like is your choice. And it's also your choice on your timetable.
Exactly. And I think judging by the number of people we have today, which is by all measures, triple than an average we have on webinars, speaks to what you're saying, proves your point that this is really something that people are looking to learn more about. I've been building few libraries lately, and obviously, as a principal, I'm sort of trying to make the expo first as well. And there is a huge value proposition to me coming out of the Expo SDK itself and all the modules, especially as when it comes down to things like, when you have fetch, for example, there's so much under the hood that should ideally be shared across different modules like blobs, for example, which just makes so much sense and it makes it much easier when you can default or refer to a specific implementation. So, um, that's really, yeah, like the Expo SDK itself is really a good suite of different things that are very easy to build upon, like, image processing, audio processing. I've been doing that lately and started looking at the Expo SDK API around that, just made it much easier because I was like, okay, so this is what I have to support. And then pulled all the internals and just made it work.
Yeah, and it really, the packages all throughout the React Native community, like all of them are really important. It's nice for these like foundational things like image, video to have like a ready-made toolkit that also works in an app alongside any other packages in the React Native ecosystem. So, starting out with that solid foundation, a few easy things to get out of the way, and then you can start specializing in those areas that are like you really need to specialize in your app, like implementing in-app purchases, or doing other complex things with device sensors and things like that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Cool. I mean, we'll have plenty of time, hopefully, to talk about all these things as we go through it. So I think just before we start, a little sort of breakdown of what is it that we're going to be talking about today and what it's going to be like. Keith with me. Obviously, Keith works at Expo, so that's why we're here. We're doing a deep dive into migrating to Expo, and I'm on behalf of Callstack, where every month, every year, we receive more and more requests from community, from customers to migrate to Expo. And I think this is a very nice avenue where we can both connect and share with you some insights and tips. Now, since Keith already sort of did a sneak peek that he's receiving a lot of these questions, he's obviously as prepared as it can be. So I'll be sort of letting him lead this webinar today with slides and all the examples he has, and I'll be helping out with moderating the panel, putting in some questions, and also giving some tips that we see internally at Callstack as well. Keith, if you're ready, we can jump straight to it. I'm controlling this whole console, so you have to let me know whether I see we're sort of about to go screen share, so
Yeah, go ahead or go for it.
let's just roll and see how it goes. Cool. All right. Perfect.
All right.
Didn't break. Didn't break. Although I will do a small tweak in the meantime anyway. Cool.
All right. So yeah, we're talking here about how, if you're starting from a React Native app that, especially if it's been in production for a while, that doesn't have any Expo tools integrated yet, how do you start and where do you go after you start? So how to gradually migrate. And I think that's something that when you have an app that's been in production for a while is like very important, that gradual part, like starting with things that you can do quickly. I feel like a lot of times folks, when they come into this conversation about how do you migrate to Expo, they're thinking, I think a lot of people associate Expo in their head with like not managing your iOS and Android folders directly, like having something generate those on the fly or having something that otherwise kind of just obfuscates those, gets those out of the way. And that's usually like actually one of the last steps you might want to do in a typical migration, because it's like really valuable to have your native projects kind of managed for you based on a configuration. But it's also like that only really affects you on the next React Native upgrade. And meanwhile, there's a lot of other tools that you could be adopting right away, just by simply taking that first step and getting the Expo package installed. So I think we've hit on some of the reasons, and these are probably reasons that for adopting Expo that come up in your discussions with clients who are interested in Expo. But you have that, that kind of that on ramp to a lot of great standard libraries that kind of like the missing toolkit from core React Native, like all these other things you need to get an app going with the Expo SDK. So once you have Expo integration, you can use the Expo SDK. You also, as we just talked about, having the SDK manage the native projects for you, so you don't check those into your code anymore. We call that continuous native generation, where it almost treats those like node modules, where it takes like a base template and applies your configuration on top of that, and any other native packages you install it automatically adds those in. So being able to like simplify your React Native upgrade process, so you don't have to look at every one of those little files in the iOS and Android folders. Of course, the cloud aspect, the Expo Application Services or EAS, cloud builds, update, CI/CD with EAS workflows now. And of course, when we get into the EAS update discussion as well, like that's all about like a whole new paradigm for updating your apps, not just being able to submit your app to the store as a new binary, but being able to update your JavaScript over the air in just a few minutes. So, that's the kind of the overview of like the different reasons. And I think as you're thinking about, I want to adopt Expo, or I think our app should adopt Expo, I think really the first step in all of that is to take that list of things that you could do when you adopt Expo and think about what's the most important to you right now, especially. And that's where we get in that discussion where like, hey, maybe you don't adopt continuous native generation right away, because actually the way you demonstrate value or get value out of it as fast as possible is by adopting EAS update, because maybe you want to change the way you update your app right away and get more and faster updates out. Or maybe you just want to use Expo SDK packages. So thinking about those lists of things that are like the most important to you can help you prioritize what to migrate and how to gradually migrate from not Expo to Expo. So I actually put up, and we could probably send the link in here somewhere. I have a blog from late last year called, it's basically the culmination of all of my hallway discussions at conferences about how do you migrate to Expo. And it's about how to incrementally adopt Expo. And as I was thinking about this, what came to my mind was this kind of like flow chart of, okay, you've got like one prerequisite, and which we'll talk about in a second, which is in adding Expo modules and support, installing the Expo package and adding a few hooks into your native project so it can do everything that Expo modules can do. And once you do that, anything on this flow path is possible, and it doesn't matter what order you do them in. So this gets back to like picking the things that are most important to you. A quick win is often like adding development builds, so you can distribute uh, local development builds to the rest of your team, and not everybody has to build their app every time. They can just start the dev server and get going for faster developments. Like you mentioned, using being able to use any of the Expo packages like Expo Camera, Expo Video, etc. So those are things you can do really quickly once you increment it, implement Expo module support. But then in this kind of green section over here, now you're moving on to you also unlock the entire Expo application services EAS ecosystem, which means now you can use EAS Build, workflows, updates, and those unlock new patterns of working with your app. Like, for instance, using PR, publishing updates as PR previews. So you can just scan a QR code and send it to your development build and now preview a PR against your JavaScript instead of having to do an entire new build. And of course, cloud builds and things like that. And then this last part, this kind of like gray purple, I'm actually not quite sure what color you call that. That part is talking about like, these are things that are like really foundational, like that you would probably want to do them long-term because they're great for maintenance or, you know, in the case of like Expo Router extending to web. But there are also things that are like bigger refactors, and I call them like slower burns. Like CNG is really good, but if you're really focused on updates, go for updates first and then go for CNG. Or even, you know, implement updates, start that PR for adding CNG in the background. And then when it's ready, it's ready. And maybe it's ready by the next React Native upgrade. That's the last time you've had to modify all of your native projects.
Yeah, I think
So
honestly speaking that this diagram, when I first saw it, it was like when you sort of shared the slides, it was the first time I saw it. I clearly did miss the blog post, but I have to say this is a very nice and very informative breakdown of how you can actually adapt it and kind of like brain dump of what are we going to be talking about today with all the different branchings and things that will happen throughout the process. So that's really nice to see, and I think for everybody watching this is probably sort of remembering that as we go through this webinar will help you sort of figure this out. And totally agree, Keith, with you on the sort of sentiment of sort of Expo being the extended standard library for React Native. Like even the CNG, I think it's perfect executed idea. And I remember there was like this very old issue in the React Native repo where somebody had an idea of just sort of generating those native modules and then native files based on some configurations. We even tried some of that back in the day in the React Native CLI when we started doing the uh, linking before auto linking, where we had the RNPM package. Probably nobody remembers that anymore these days, but there was this
I
idea.
remember.
Exactly, and so that was the CNG 0.1 alpha, where you were pulling the package from Node modules, and then we were customizing the Xcode project to manually link it as a dependency, which was sort of like CNG, just that like, sort of the config plugins, I'd say. That was obviously way behind what CNG offers today, but it's a very nice abstraction, to be honest, for abstracting away a bunch of different things that you usually have to perform on your own. So um, just wanted to add that in. Otherwise, this is a very informative breakdown, and excited to go through it.
Yeah, not to get too far ahead on CNG, but as you were explaining that made me think back to I have a companion blog that goes deep into like CNG and how it works. And when you're thinking about adopting CNG, I often try to explain to folks that actually, if you've been maintaining your React Native project long enough, you've probably been like playing CNG on paper, where you have cataloged what your changes you've made to your native projects are. And maybe even a few times in the course of building your React Native app, you have kind of gone back to the base template, and either like partially or fully like tried to reapply your
Yeah, totally.
codifications on top of that. And that's really like what CNG is it automates that. But like I think it's really important that it's a heads up to us in something we live when you've been working on an app long enough, which is like, how do I understand this? So like it goes from like understanding, doing it manually to automate. And what's really cool too is like when you get to the point where you're not only just like automate with like standard config plugins, but you're writing your own config plugins, like learning how your project is modified at a code level, like even though that takes a little bit longer technically than like going and clicking the buttons in Xcode, like you actually, by abstracting away your native projects, you actually understand your native code better.
Totally.
But that's later. That's phase 3. So I guess we should do phase 1 first.
Okay.
So yeah, that first phase is in like, there's one prerequisite for anything else in that flowchart, which is installing the Expo package. And I call it Expo module support in here, like, because it is technically speaking, you could just install the Expo package and do a lot of these other things, but there's like a few modifications you would want to make to your native project to fully take advantage of everything. So one thing I was doing as I was building this, and I've done this a few times now. I'm going to cross my fingers and hope this actually shows up here, because GitHub went down right before we were
Exactly.
starting. And
What timing, right?
yeah, but I think it actually came back. So as long as I hit refresh and this actually works, perfect. And we could send this link out and share them too. This is kind of a companion to the presentation where I wanted to walk through these steps that we're going to walk through. So actually, let me close one window here so it's a little bit easier to shift between these guys here. That was my backup in case GitHub did not come back. Was to just show you.
Did you foresee that as an option, or and you always do the backup, or it went down already in the morning? You were like, okay, it's very.
It was desperation mode because it was 20 minutes before we started.
I see. Yeah. Been there, done that.
I was like, things you shouldn't rely on GitHub being there when I'm going to start filming. So what I did here is I actually, and we'll use this to refer back to as we refer to the different steps, took a project, started from React Native Community CLI, creating it with version 0.79.5, since that's like the one that SDK 53 currently supports. And SDK 54 is coming very soon, and it will be, I forget if that's Expo or React Native 80 or 81, but it'll be whatever the latest is when it comes out. But taking, a recent version of React Native Community CLI default template and adding each of these pieces of Expo step by step. So that first step gets back to adding Expo module support. So this is the one thing you have to do before you do any other things. And we have a script for it, npx install Expo modules. This will attempt to do the automations for you. On a default project, that generally works. Like if you haven't really customized app delegate or main activity or all those things. If you have made customizations, we do have manual instructions where we describe like, this is exactly the things that are changing to enable full Expo module support.
If one comment here I can say is that we actually performed a migration to Expo for one of our clients, and their native code base is very custom, so we were not able to adapt CNG at this point. But despite that fact, we're able to sort of get started with the npx install Expo modules pretty much immediately without any changes. So that speaks to when you say it's sort of going to work. For most cases, it really does, despite the complexities that you may feel like are going to be a blocker typically.
Yeah. And that's what that speaks to is like, it's a relatively light touch. So early on, I think we've mostly dispelled this rumor or this mistake, this misconception. So I hesitate to even say it out loud, but a lot of folks used to be like, well, I don't want to adopt Expo because Expo is another layer on top of React Native. And that's like, and so it was just like this general idea of like, if you have too many layers, like your app will mysteriously not perform as well or something like that. Then of course that's not really how software development works. But it's also not how Expo works. Adopting Expo is like a relatively light touch on your app. So if I go in here, okay, we added the Expo package. I updated a few commands because when you adopt Expo fully, you're going to switch over to the Expo CLI, and you're going to be functionally equivalent from the React Native CLI for your main flow path here. It's basically a one-to-one. Okay, if you were building your iOS app with React Native Run iOS before, you're now going to build your iOS app with npx Expo Run iOS. Same thing, but it's going to be cognizant of those like Expo modifications in there. You do need to because there's some optimizations to the Metro bundler. You're going to use inherit from the Expo Metro config, but you're otherwise going to be able to use whatever configurations in Metro you were using before. And then in terms of the native project modifications that yourself, basically it's adding, it's changing the inheritance of like app delegate. So Expo modules, like things like, not all Expo modules require this, but things like Expo updates, for instance, which need to run when your app starts. So you need to have hooks into like the app delegate lifecycle methods, like, application will start. Or actually, application did finish launching with options. So like instead of, back in like the old way we would do these things, that we had packages that needed to run before any JavaScript ran, we would add another line to did finish launching with options. And that's how we would get, very custom configurations over time. All the Expo modules in the Expo SDK are all built on the Expo Modules API, which has hooks into these lifecycle methods. So as long as your app delegate implements Expo app delegate, anytime you install an Expo module, if it has some startup hook or some other lifecycle hook, it will automatically be integrated. So your app delegate, even when you're pre-CNG and you're checking in this code still, it's a very clean app delegate because you don't have to add custom bits of code just because you need to hook into native
Yeah,
lifecycle
and
methods.
that's really handy, honestly. I mean, from the perspective of building, and I'm not sure if that's part of the migration or that's a topic for another webinar, which is sort of going deeper into Expo modules and all the great developer improvements you have. I'm sort of starting to lean more towards it as I keep building turbo modules, and I'm seeing a lot of challenges or missing features that I'd love to have, and I see you guys have them. But I think, from the perspective of the startup time, that speaks to me a lot because I've been, trying to do a bunch of different things like accessing the JSI runtime from the module, maybe installing some global hooks or hooking into the life cycle of the module. It is not really that easy or that obvious. And the documentation, unfortunately, although it is there, it is just not so easy to find. Because it's sort of buried somewhere deeper in the advanced native development or perhaps on GitHub. So the fact that this small abstraction makes it easier for Expo modules to inject different lifecycle methods, I think that's a really handy feature for developers later on, rather than the sort of the application developers. But I wasn't aware you guys had support for that, but it sort of comes really handy. I can definitely confirm that.
Yeah. And you're right. Like, since as we're seeing here, there's that many changes going from a React Native Community CLI app to an Expo app. So it's still compatible with the rest of the ecosystem. And
Yeah.
the different ways of writing native modules, they all have like, focused use cases. So like Expo Modules API was very focused on like, how do we quickly iterate the Expo SDK? And you'll see as it's actually, the Expo Modules API has been fully fleshed out. Well, it is like a thing that you can write your own custom modules, and we're seeing more and more of that. Like, it was built and dog fooded based on like us extending the Expo SDK faster and faster. And like as that started to fill out, that's where you saw like new, Expo image, Expo video, the new Expo file system, all these the new Expo SQLite, all these new Expo modules API packages started to come out as we had kind of finished that up. And you can take advantage of that same thing. It's very focused on simplifying access to these core native things. One thing I was thinking about is I bought one of those Android flip phones, and I really wanted to hook into the API that tells you when the flip phone is like half open, like it's a standard Android API. So you can tell if it's like sitting on a tabletop. So you could like move the controls to the top and or to the bottom and then put the screen on a
Yeah,
video screen on top or something like that. And that's a life cycle thing that happens at the beginning of main activity because it's like a global listener at the Android native level. And like hooking that into an Expo module because you can just hook into those listeners is much easier than if I had to figure that out on my own.
Yep.
So yeah, anyway, that kind of sums up what's happening here. And like it's not like if this is an extra layer on top of your app, then like simple like code inheritance is an extra layer, which we know that's not how compiling code works. So this is a very light touch, and this gives you access to the entire Expo Modules ecosystem. And from there, you can run the Expo CLI. You can run, if you run npx Expo install and then any Expo package, like for instance, Expo Camera, it will automatically install the correct version for your Expo SDK, which is also by extension the correct version for your React Native version. So to a certain extent, it simplifies making sure everything is on a compatible version. And yeah, very simple.
That's really pluggable setup. I mean, we'll probably see it down the road anyway. But what I keep thinking is, after you said it, is that I mean, we could just move all those pieces from Expo repo to React Native Community, and they would still sort of make sense. Just because these are like just different pieces that can be adapted independently, and that really sort of shows the power of composition in this community, and then how React Native is easy to sort of build on top of.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so yeah, the only prerequisite is do this, and now you have the Expo SDK, and you have, and actually I have a pull request while we're kind of on our little phase one of just using Expo SDK packages. A particular SDK package that I think often resonates with a lot of folks looking to like get some quick wins out of adopting Expo support in their app, and that is Expo DevClient. So this enables a development build. So if you've dabbled in Expo and you've tried Expo Go, which is a sandbox for being able to run a subset of React Native without actually having to build an app. Uh, this is the Expo Go experience, but customized to your native runtime. Like it has all of your native dependencies in it. And this is a lot of folks like wonder like, oh, do I have to do a lot of other things to adopt this? And actually, no, it's really simple. You install Expo DevClient and you add a URI scheme so it knows how to like launch from the QR code into your app. And you make a debug build. And by virtue of it being a debug build, it automatically is going to switch to a development build, which means instead of pointing like to a very specific URL to run from the local dev server, it's going to be able to like take this QR code or this really URL as input and run from any dev server, or as we'll later find out on a published update. So this is how we kind of go from like npx expo run iOS to you could go distribute builds for, take one build and give it to your entire development team. And then they could run npx expo start, get a QR code. And mine's, I think I would back a branch. So I would just go to development build. There we go. So this QR code, and they could scan it with their device that has the development build installed. And now they can do JavaScript feature development in React Native without having anything else installed in their computer other than a node environment. I actually do my hobby development on a Windows computer with an ARM processor. So it can't run Android Studio, needless to say, it can't run Xcode. And it can't even run an Android emulator technically. And I actually get really far in my development just because I build development builds and then just have one build and just keep running a local dev server, almost like I'm developing a web app.
Yeah, that's probably one of the reasons why Expo became so popular throughout all the vibe coding platforms these days. I'm like, everybody's building on top of Expo these days. When it comes to all those front-end interfaces that require less infrastructure, which is probably The reason why. Keith, one question I have. I'll be pulling some questions from the chat as we speak. One question I have is from Maggie, which is about um, Expo SDK version. Should we get our application on the React Native version that Expo SDK version is using? For example, if the React Native version in my app is 79.2, should we upgrade to 79.5 and then install Expo modules? Or Expo install Expo modules will somehow match perhaps those modules, or SDK 53, for example, is more relaxed when it comes to React Native version that it bundles within itself.
It's actually an interesting question because I think in the future we hope it's like a little bit more firm of like only certain small changes happen with each patch release. I would recommend to get on the latest patch release, just because when you run npx expo install, like it's going to say like, hey, this is the latest compatible version with all these different things are compatible, and that means you can adopt, very safely adopt the latest Expo SDK version. So if it's not like uh, uh, if you don't see like a major roadblock in like another dependency you would have, I would try to get on the latest React Native patch version first. Um,
Yeah,
I think
that seems like a very easy task to do anyway, considering that patches are unlikely to break anything. I would say the more interesting question would be which, if you're say on 62 of 72 of React Native, which is actually Benjamin actually was very quick to follow up with this question, which is what I was trying to say now. When you depend on 72 or maybe 78 in this case would be SDK 52, I guess, and 80 would be 53, which last time I checked was the Canary version. Not sure if it's still the Canary or not, but yeah, that would be my question.
yeah,
Is that
yeah, this is
or
a slightly different one.
yeah.
So I would say you would want to get to the React Native version that matches a supported Expo version. So typically the support is like last three SDKs, where we're doing some subset of like most critical patches to them. And so we're on the eve of SDK 54. So I would say get to SDK 52, which I believe is React Native 78, is what the one that matches SDK 52. So I would do that. Like there's some, well, I would say that like these things don't always go together, but a lot of cases, if you're 3 or 4 or 5 or more React Native versions behind, you might also have other things that make adopting new stuff more difficult. So getting your app upgraded to a relatively recent version just within that support window means that you're going to have a much easier time with like certain other complex scenarios. Like for instance, if you have a heavily customized app delegate and you need to do some configuration for Expo updates manually, we have a document for that has a known good setup on SDK 52 and forward. So getting yourself to a supported version, you're going to have yourself on a much better glide path towards implementing anything else you want to do in the Expo ecosystem.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that said, we can go back to the screen and yeah, continue with where we were.
Yep. So yeah, I think we're actually. I'm not sure if you want to cover anything else on the
I think
first part of the migration, but we might be ready for phase two.
yeah, that makes sense to me. I think one thing I wanted to say is when we were doing the migration ourselves, specifically a great example I can show. I mean, I cannot show it because that would mean sort of blowing this whole setup we have here. But what I can speak to is I wouldn't really underestimate the Expo SDK added value. To me, the sort of one of the challenges, I mean, it's a blessing, but it's a curse as well of the community, is the number of packages. And obviously, the composition is great, but as you start building, you sort of go into different incompatible packages. Perhaps maintenance becomes an issue, and even these days, you can end up with three diverging module systems because you will have Expo modules, Turbo modules, Nitro modules. Maybe somebody's even using our Node API stuff on the bleeding edge. There's like four at least these days. Um, so When we were migrating to Expo, actually, we were able to replace some of the community packages that we were using with the Expo SDK provided packages. And great example here is the React Native in-app browser reborn, which, as you can clearly guess from the name, is a reborn version of another pack, and that one already sort of slowly dies as well. And we were able to replace it one to one with the Expo web browser, and at the same time getting rid of multiple unnecessary properties. For example, before the migration, we would have 7 properties, and that we had to configure in order to open the URL. And now we just need 3. So we were able to get rid of properties, simplify the code, and just use something that has the guarantee of the SDK in terms of the quality, in terms of maintenance. So that was a very, very nice added value. At which point I was like, this is already a no brainer. If you're building, just get with the Expo SDK and sort of adapt those modules, because that's really helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, and you'll see what the Expo SDK doesn't have every single piece of native functionality in there. It focuses very squarely on those, like providing a good implementation of like core native features, like web browser as a good example, and making sure that works across different web browser scenarios, like whether it's like an OAuth workflow or just another, integrated browser thing. Images, everybody needs images, and there seemed to be a need in the ecosystem for like a really solid image library. So that's where Expo Image came into play. But on the other hand, like things like, maybe we did do an in-app purchase library at one point, but Revenue Cat's in-app purchase library just kind of became like, this is like a very good up-to-date implementation. These are folks who are experts in in-app purchases and can keep up with the changes in that ecosystem. So we're trying to fill those gaps in. So like when you're going between packages in the Expo SDK and packages in the ecosystem, you feel like all of those different core native features are covered.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So just one last question before we move on. Can we pause at any phase for an extended period of time, or should we plan for a complete migration, since stopping only at a phase 1 might create problems?
All of these can be executed independently. You can go for phase 1 and leave it there. The only reason I call it phase 1 is because it has like the one prerequisite to anything else. And because you probably, if you went through the trouble of phase 1, you might at least want to do phase 1A, which I guess would be like Expo SDK packages, but you probably are also interested in phase 2 or phase 3. But yeah, you could do Expo module support. You could leave that in your app for 3 years, probably keep it relatively up to date.
Yeah.
Keep up to date. And then go implement EAS update later.
Totally. Same over here. I think CNG is, like some of the projects we have, they're sort of stuck. I mean, I wouldn't say stuck, just done with the phase 2, because that's where they see most of the value. I think it boils down to where is your challenge and what you're trying to solve, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some clients are like really struggling with dependencies, might not be struggling so much with the release process, so they might be like, okay, we're fine. We have this sophisticated Jenkins or whatnot. But the others might be like, yeah, we're struggling with the release process as well. We need to adapt EAS Build and all these things. So it's kind of very, very that's why I find Expo really
Yeah.
these days, because it's like back in the day it used to be all or nothing, right? And you were like missing out. These days it's very, very modular, which is really
There. Yeah. And it occurred to me that the word phase might actually be the wrong word, because
yeah.
like it isn't to imply that you're not finished when you do any one of them. It was just the idea was that like these are different mentalities of like different values you're trying to unlock
Yeah.
on your Expo journey.
To be honest, I don't even know what's a better name than phase.
Yeah, I mean, so we'll go for it.
Yeah. But yeah, this is where it gets interesting, and I see there is few recent additions already on the diagram, so that's a fresh one, because you guys got Repack here as well. So yeah, what's the phase 2 all about?
Yeah, so this is all about Expo application services. So this is the cloud element. This is EAS build, cloud builds, EAS update, over the air updates of your JavaScript. And now most as of the very late last year, we have EAS workflows, which is the ability to stitch EAS build jobs, EAS update jobs, and other companion jobs in your own custom workflows, like just like you would with any other CI/CD system. But in this case, it's very focused on the needs of React Native mobile developers. So, in any of these things you can do, a lot of folks go straight from here to EAS update because maybe they already have a pretty established build process on their own infrastructure, but they want to unlock the capability of OTA updates. So like Expo modules straight to EAS update, very, very frequent migration path. But yeah, I have a few PRs in here in our in my little sample project here that demonstrate the ease of adding these. So we have EAS Build. I did EAS Build first just because you generate some files. You generate the same files whether you do EAS Build or EAS Update configuration files, and it was a little easier to explain. But when to do the EAS Build, and this is really the whole like adding EAS capabilities to your app, is this EAS init command. And all this does is it creates a project on the Expo website and gives you a project ID. And this is your gateway into, it creates this little thing right here. And this is how you can proceed to building and updating on all those things. So you run EAS init, and then you run EAS build configure, and this is what generates the EAS JSON file, which has your build profiles. So when we think about how we build our app, we often are thinking about different variants or flavors or different modes of building. In the case of local development, we might be thinking about development builds. So I have like two profiles here, one for devices and one for simulators. And then if you're thinking about like testing your app pre-production, but now you want to like, you're outside of development, so you want to treat it as a standalone app, you might have that's the default, the preview. And would be like, let's use like APK distribution for Android or ad hoc distribution. But you also could use test flight if you wanted to. So that's what that distribution flag in there. And then finally, we get to like production. And this is like, let's go to the store. And with production, definitely you would want to implement EAS submit, which lets you create, basically set up those tokens that you need to submit to the App Store, and then build your app and submit it to test flight or to Play Store in one command. And that typically looks like this, actually: EAS build, profile, production, and then auto submit. And that command right there, it'll queue up a build job on the EAS cloud, and it'll queue up a submit job that'll happen after the build job if it succeeds. So once you do that, and like, it does not matter, you don't need CNG. I took my otherwise stock project here. All it had was Expo Modules integration, and I was able to add support for EAS build here. And now I can run builds in the cloud. Depending on my plan on EAS, I can have multiple concurrencies on there. So if you're interested in simplifying that build infrastructure and letting that kind of being taken care of by a known good configuration, that's also very fast. We try to optimize the heck out of EAS build, run it on, you have an option of running on the latest like M4 Pro builders and getting really fast builds out of it. So that whole thing is unlocked really just with a few simple modifications here. And then of course is EAS update. EAS update is there's some small, I should say that how you do it actually. So we had those steps we did initially where we initialized our project for EAS, and then we do EAS update configure, just like build configure. And if you are not using CNG, if you're managing your own native projects, this will actually make the small modifications you need to your native projects for you. So if we look into our change here, we're going to see like every app, whether it's CNG or not, is going to add the updates URL here, which is just saying this is where my app is going to check for updates when it's running. And in the case of native, it's going to add like a simple plist configuration for iOS. And this is just going to say like some essential parameters, like here's where I plug that URL in my native project. So my native project, when it starts up, it'll actually go check for an over-the-air update and download it if it's available. and also properties for like the channel. So you can isolate updates between channels. Like you can have a production channel, which will update your production app, and you can have a preview channel, which would update your preview app. So you can isolate, pre-production versus production and all those sorts of things. And very similar thing to Android Manifest. One nice thing about if you've configured EAS Build and you configure updates, EAS Build has a custom step that will automatically update these values based on your build profile. So it'll change the like channel and things like that to production or preview, or if you're changing the runtime version, which runtime version is a concept in EAS update to isolate updates so they only run on compatible builds. So a lot of folks will increment this with their app version to be like, well, I don't want to accidentally publish a JavaScript update to version 1.0 when it's only compatible with 2.0. So it has those built-in concepts in here. And once you can do that, you now have over-the-air updates in your app. And there's a whole, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was actually wanted to ask a question regarding that. I mean,
Sure.
there's been a few, but I'll just break it down on per service basis as we go through. So one question is, I love this type of question, which is something just a wrapper? And in this particular case, Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but also I'd love to hear from your side um, the infrastructure of that. My understanding is that there are differences, and that's an entirely different infrastructure for running those updates. You do have a migration path from the code push. And as far as code push itself, we've been doing a few migrations away from code push back when it was deprecated. And I think the general conclusion that I remember doing those migrations was that we treated code push more as a protocol in which different providers can sort of build their cloud offering, or they can build their infrastructure and just sort of make it compatible with the code push payload. And that is what you consider a code push sort of compatible infrastructure. I guess there are differences into how ES Update works as far as those branching and releases and all those methodologies. So I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So this is a good point to differentiate EAS Update, the cloud service. It uses the Expo Updates protocol, which is an open protocol. You can implement it on your own servers. Other folks have actually implemented on their servers. And so like there's like kind of two separate things. Like the Expo Updates protocol, it is a distinct protocol from Code Push. So
It would
EAS
be an
Update.
equivalent of the code push in terms of abstractions, right?
Yeah. Like Code Push protocol is one protocol.
Yeah.
Expo Updates protocol is another protocol, but they are essentially trying to accomplish the same goal, which is, hey, this is a way for your app to check on startup, a particular URL, and request a compatible update, and then download that update and apply it. So when we talk about the Expo Updates protocol, that's what the open protocol implements foundationally, is just like, here is a library you can use. Like you can actually change that URL in, let me get it on the right PR here. You can change this URL right here in your app.json to a custom server that implements the Expo Updates protocol. And we have a reference implementation for that. That just handles that two-way communication. When we talk about channels and branches and all those things that you'll see in the Expo web dashboard, that is EAS specific at that point. So basically, like EAS has its own way of like isolating updates to different scenarios, or grouping together, or like handling rollouts between one branch or another branch. But they ultimately run through this standard open protocol that requests an update and then gets an update back in certain conditions. And talking about going from code push to EAS update, or even to another server that uses the Expo Updates protocol. One document I wanted to point out here: if you just search for Expo updates or updates existing in our docs, you'll find this install Expo updates in existing. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I wanted this one: using EAS update in existing native app. So this is a good reference if you're switching from code push to EAS update and you have a highly customized native project, just because it's actually going to describe the individual customizations and let you specify those at a more granular level. So a number of folks have used processes like similar to this to like pinpoint that exact little spot where they implemented the code push download and just change that out for EAS updates.
Yeah. That makes sense. And actually, I think a very nice follow-up question to this, and I'm starting to get an understanding as well in terms of the differences between Expo ES updates and Expo updates, is going to be related to this long question, but it fits on screen. In order to use ES updates, is it mandatory to build using ES Build? Um, that's basically the question. And I think that would be the difference here would be whether we mean ES updates, and I'm guessing the answer is yes, versus using Expo updates protocol with different cloud provider. But Keith, I'd be down to hear your thoughts on this one.
Answer is actually no. You do not have to build with EAS Build to use EAS Update. Actually, in my previous life before I was working in dev success at Expo, I was building my own app. And actually, my app was always for 100% of its life built on its own infrastructure, which in my case was just a Mac in the cloud that I rented and kicked off the commands manual. It was a very primitive setup, not exactly CI/CD, but it was an app that only used updates from Expo. At that time, it was called Expo Updates, but it was the precursor product to EAS Update. So yes, you can build entirely on your own infrastructure. You can build with an entirely custom build flow path. The only things you would have to be aware of if you were just using a completely custom build pipeline is making sure, like if runtime version changes, for instance, that you have something that will update the runtime version in your Android manifest. So like you keep these values consistent throughout app.json and Android manifest. But and also since like the local flag was mentioned, so that local flag applies specifically to EAS build. It had its origin as like a diagnostic tool where basically it would run the entire EAS build process locally and use like your own like Node, Xcode, Java dependencies, all those things. But otherwise, like kind of like copy your project into a temp folder and build it as if EAS build would build it. And we do have some folks who like run that on their own infrastructure as well. And that has one link to the Expo server, which is it will log in and download credentials because EAS build handles your distribution certificates, your provisioning profiles, your key stores for you. So it does have that link in there, but you don't have to use a local build. You could even just copy the steps from, or you could use your existing flow path. You could actually copy the steps you have documented exactly how an EAS build works. So you could copy our fast file and do it with Fastlane. So it's totally your choice. If you want to use your own build infra and EAS updates in the cloud, totally your choice.
That makes sense. Thanks for explaining that. I think this one we already answered as well, partially answering the other question is about using your own.
Yes.
Yes, the answer is yes. We already gone through it as well. Yeah, cool. I see we got a few more questions. There's a few questions about Explorer and stuff. We'll get there later. I'm looking if we have anything related to the EAS builds. I think that might be it. So I'll pass it back to you, Keith, onto what's next in the whole EAS sort of diagram.
Certainly. And I'll go through this one real quick so we can get to stuff like CNG and Expo Router. But I did add one more in here since we do have EAS workflows. And EAS workflows, as I mentioned, is a way to combine the different individual EAS job building blocks, updates, and builds into your own custom workflows. So in this case, I've already configured my project. It already has like an EAS project ID that's inside my app.json. But now I'm adding YAML files here. And like a really simple one I did was publish a PR preview. So here I'm using EAS update. I'm already configured for EAS update, but instead of always running on demand or putting that EAS update command into like a GitHub action, I can set up my app I can add the GitHub app to my project. Expo has a GitHub app, and then once that is linked, this workflow will run anytime I update a PR. So this is yeah, if you want to start to customize these steps, and where this gets really interesting is we have these extra tools in there besides just build and update, but we have something called fingerprint. This gets relevant as you actually implement CNG because it needs to read the configuration files for native project, but this is trying to like only build when you have to. So like if you already have a native build that matches the same native project setup as a previous build, don't build it again, just repack the JavaScript. And this particular workflow in this example is like, okay, let's check if we have a compatible, we just updated our code, check if we have a compatible build using the fingerprint. If we have a compatible build, update my JavaScript in the compatible build, like pull out the old JavaScript, put in the new JavaScript, uh, and then run Maestro end-to-end tests on it, and then go do the same thing for iOS. So this is just unlocks a whole lot of ability to like customize these steps, but still run in that same like EAS infrastructure experience that you did when you were using EAS Build and Update standalone.
That makes sense. The fingerprint is really cool, and that's for sure. Keith, what about Repack, which is the latest greatest addition to this entire stack?
Yeah, so this
Oh,
Repack
you have
is
it
that.
already.
Yeah, this
Right.
is the step for bundling. Like, see if I have a existing workflow on here real quick that I would actually just show it. I didn't run on this project, but I think I ran it on this run. Workflow. Here we go. Apparently I did a lot of published preview updates. I should have a Maestro one here. I think this one would show it as well. Okay, yeah, this one does show it. This is a different one where I was trying to run a repack only like for the sake of actually. Oh no, this is the right one. I think I just named it wrong. That's what I did. It failed, but that's okay. This is saying right here. This is like how workflows work. This actually going to show you an entire graph of it. But in this case, I am going to run the fingerprint, check for an existing Android build, and check for an existing iOS build. Since these are vertical or vertical going down, these are happening simultaneously. So it's now splitting into like simultaneous iOS and Android. And then it is running the iOS repack if it finds that I don't have or if I do have a matching native build that matches the fingerprint. And then it's running the iOS Maestro test. So the primary value add here versus just say like building again is that I can execute Maestro tests a lot faster. So say I want to have like a smoke test every time I push domain, right? Even every time I commit on a PR, but I don't want to wait like 15 minutes for a build every time. I just want to wait like a couple minutes because otherwise I just might run the test less. So this is where Repack comes into play because 95% of the time, like the reason we all got in the React Native in the first place was because we wanted to do like feature development, business logic in JavaScript, and then save like those foundational changes for native builds. We only wanted to do native changes infrequently in most cases. So let's take advantage of that and only rebuild the JavaScript in that 95% case. So we don't have, we can do like a lot of things faster. And we can also do them more efficiently. So that's what Repack does. It just takes an existing build and plugs new JavaScript into it.
Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. That's really cool. And I think there's so much time wasted otherwise on those very simple things. So being able to save some time and not necessarily build something when it's not needed is really cool.
Here's the working Maestro one. I realize that's the right one I meant to show you.
Yeah, it's a bit more. It's a bit more organized in terms of the
Yeah.
connection here than the previous one. Cool. All right. So that is the EAS sort of phase two, which is what we just talked about. And I guess at the very end we have the successor to um, the successor to the eject, right? Which is a better version, better way to run this. I mean, not necessarily a successor, just a probably really different
Yeah,
way. An
it is
alternative.
important to differentiate though. So like back in the day when you had to either like there was only so much you could do in like that automated like Expo is managing your native projects for you kind of workflow. Uh, we had this thing called eject because if you had to do more customization that couldn't be accomplished just through like what you could change in app.json, you would generate your native projects, your native iOS and Android folders one time. And then going forward, you would manually edit those. That's actually what I did way back in like 2018 is I ejected because I needed to add HealthKit support to my app. So from that point forward, I was on the hook for all those little bits on every
You know what's funny?
React Native Build.
What's funny is we used to have the React Native Health Kit NPM package. So yeah, you may have been using some code I made like 8 years ago,
Yeah,
which
yeah, it's
I
possible.
apologize for in advance, but cool.
But
Yeah.
so now we call it pre-build is the actual command today. And the command is called pre-build. The concept we call it continuous native generation because we want to describe not just a single command, but we want to describe a mindset where we no longer check in our iOS and Android folders and we let those get generated on the fly. Like the way you run like npm install when you want to install node modules. Like you don't check in your node module folder. You just let that get generated whenever you're about to build your app. Likewise, let's not check in our iOS and Android folders and let's treat them as ephemeral things that only get generated just in time right when we're about to build. So that's why I kind of put these two little boxes together is this is a thing you can go straight to if you want it. If this is your number one reason for adopting Expo is you no longer want to manage iOS and Android folders, you can go straight from installing the Expo package to CNG. And likewise, Expo Router is another path like that too. But I put these ones over here because they are bigger refactors, at least in some cases. So in the case of CNG, I'm going to go over to my PR here. And let me find it. This is the one I left open because I just finished it because of GitHub going down earlier. So I, in the case of a the default React Native Community CLI project I created, I didn't really have any customizations to my native projects. So the first step in this is really like, what have you customized? So if you've added anything to App Delegate, if you've added anything to Android Manifest, you're going to want to take inventory of those things and make sure you replicate them in the CNG way. And there's a few ways that takes place here. So you'll see here, I took a bunch of things that were inside of my native projects, like the short name, the name that goes under my icon, the adaptive icon, the bundle ID, things like that. And I replicated those in app.json. So this is setting my app for like, if I'm about to build and it doesn't see an iOS or Android folder there, it's going to run pre-build and it's going to generate a native project that is customized to my needs based on this configuration. But in the case where maybe there's not a built-in configuration point for it, that's where config plugins come in. So in my little example here, I did a very simple one where let's say I want to change my, minimum compatible Android version or my minimum compatible iOS version. That is a configuration point inside the native project. I could open Xcode and I could open the project properties and I could change that value. But in the CNG world, I don't have a permanent iOS project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a config plugin, which is a little bit of JavaScript, and I'm going to give it those properties. So after it applies the default configuration, pre-build is then going to apply the config plugins. So in this case, it's going to run a little bit of JavaScript that is going to change the min SDK version of Android Manifest, change the deployment target in project.pbx proj, and then continue with my build. And likewise, you can write, if you have a customization that's fully your own customization, you can write your own config plugin. We have a newly enhanced guide on that on our docs. And it's not only that you don't have to have like your own separate package for these. You can actually just reference a JavaScript file in here, and the JavaScript file can modify these things directly, or it can modify them through things we call mods, which are just little bits of JavaScript functions you can call that will do safe modifications. Like it'll modify info.plist using an info plist parser, which is a lot safer than trying to go like use a regex or things like that. So we have built-in things that'll do a lot of these configurations for you, but you can write your own config plugins. So I like to tell people that like pre-build is like Turing complete for native projects, because like if you can express it as a file, a change in your file system, like at the end of the day, iOS and Android folders are just things in our file system and they're written a certain way. And you can write config plugins that make arbitrary changes to the file system. And there's things that make that safer, but fundamentally you can do anything you want in a config plugin. So that means that no matter what, you never have to eject anymore. You can always be in CNG. It's just a matter of like what customizations you write as config
But
plugins.
there's always an option to run the unsafe migrations, unsafe modifications.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
like pretty much a catch-all.
Right. Yeah. Actually, we call it when you write the config plugin, you wrap it in a mod called dangerous mod. And I like to tell people like, go with danger. Don't worry too much about how it's called dangerous mod. That just means that like you could do anything you want in there. It doesn't mean it's something to watch out for. Like, yes, doing a regex to modify app delegate is not as safe as using a plist parser to modify info plist.
But I think
Yeah.
yeah, one of those custom modifications is the I've seen the Expo app target by Evan, where he
Yes.
lets you build for like different targets, and it's totally like dangerous modification for sure. Keith, one thing this is a very interesting comment from the stream. Apparently, it seems like you're running off the battery. You got 18, so should be good though. But
You turned down my brightness a little bit. I did notice it was going a lot faster than I normally.
yeah, but yeah, that is pretty cool. Yeah.
So yeah, that's CNG right there. So this diff right here, it looks dramatic. The reason it looks dramatic is because we deleted the Android and iOS folders.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but otherwise, like it's exchanging those big folders, which are things that we don't always fully understand the contents of. It's exchanging them for configuration that pinpoints exactly what we want to modify to make our native projects our own native projects.
Yeah, and I think the place where it gets complex for some of those people migrating to CNG is where they have custom code, sort of all the things in one file, and they have to figure out how to split it to config plugins, right? Like, I don't know, sometimes back in the day when you'd have a brownfield application with some native code, you would just go ahead without thinking and just modify some headers. And
Right.
1 year later, nobody remembers that anymore. So config plugins at least help you orchestrate it. So let's say in order to complete the migration properly, you should at least structure your native code, custom native code within some subfolders perhaps or submodules with the config plugins so you can keep it structured. But it is often where it is not that easy after you got so much native code in the app. That's the number one challenge I see when
Yeah.
people try to migrate to CNG. It is worth it. It's just not as straightforward in some cases.
Yeah. And that's why I put it at the end, which is like it is often very much worth it, but it's the benefits are realized later. And like you don't want to, if you need over-the-air updates for your deployment process right now, you don't want to wait all that time to get CNG in and then do updates. Like if you want to show value in your Expo migration right now, and updates was your big reason for doing it, and CNG is just along for the ride, go get updates first, and then go, have someone do a spike card to figure out the complexity of adding CNG, and then go work on that in the background and have it ready for your next React Native upgrade if you can. And then you'll be in the same place you were, except you've gotten a lot more done upfront than you would have otherwise if you waited until you had CNG implemented.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. There is a bunch of different Expo features that I'm excited about that are totally not related to the migration itself, like the Expo router, the Expo UI, the use DOM, right? Like these are things that are not necessarily tied to any of those phases in particular, probably just the enablers already available after phase one. And there's been few questions around the Expo router already. I see you
Yep.
put it at the end of your sort of phases diagram. Was that because of the complexity? I guess migration to Expo router is slightly more complex than just
Yeah.
because of the structure. Uh, but if you're starting fresh, you can adapt it earlier, I guess.
Yeah, if you're starting fresh, it's in the default template now. So you'll be an Expo router unless you opt out of it. But it's perfectly okay to opt out of it. Like it's Expo apps are compatible with Expo router or React navigation. I put at the end because if you have and this PR doesn't really do it justice because the default template has one screen. But if you have a production app with dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of screens, um, Expo router is a big refactor, and that's really the only reason I put it last. It's back to the same reason why you might migrate to CNG later is that there's big benefits, but you don't want to put those as prerequisites to the things that you can realize a lot quicker, like through updates and build and using the Expo SDK. You are going to, with an Expo router migration, you are going to touch every screen at that point. There are patterns that can make that pretty easy. Like for instance, treating your Expo router folders as just like kind of like pointers to your existing screens. That's a strategy that a lot of folks do to migrate to Expo router without refactoring a lot of code. A lot less import references to change if you do it that way. But the benefits, it really is like probably the way I would strongly recommend it if you're part of your motivation is to go from like native mobile only to web. Expo router really helps out with that because out of the box, you're going to get deep links to everything. Like everything is a coherent URL as if you're using, making a web app in Next.js, that sort of thing. And those deep links then, of course, extend to your mobile app where now every screen in your mobile app has a built-in deep link. So that's, I think a lot when folks are thinking about Expo router and deciding where to put that in the path, that's going to be like a big motivation is do you want easy default deep linking right away?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I guess, based on the sort of everything we discussed today and all those different phases, what seems to me is that there is really no like all those phases are standalone, sort of independent. And I think as soon as you adapt Expo modules, everything else becomes very much gradual and available on as needed basis, which is really exciting to me. In a way that you got the Expo modules up and running, you need UI, Expo UI, you got it. You need the DOM, Expo router, EAS, everything else, depending on where you are, it's available there for you. And that's what we see being a sentiment amongst our clients, which is we're just going to adapt whatever is necessary at this point,
Yes.
which often means just going with the phase one and seeing what else is there. And that's really that's really valuable, especially for me, remembering how and what the feedback used to be on the Expo migrations back in the day. That's really amazing. That's how I would think about it. Um, so I guess with that in mind, we can start slowly going to conclusions. That is my conclusion basically, and I really appreciated the breakdown of different pieces. What is your conclusion out of
Yeah,
it?
I mean, to kind of piggyback off of that, I love telling that story. As a developer who, built an app years ago where it wasn't as easy to do that, to increment and migrate that. And also just like a long career, even before React Native, dealing with brownfield applications, with applications that maybe were there before, maybe that application was, at my workplace that I came into when I was a kid, like it's that old, you know what I mean? I think, yeah, my first job, when I walked in there, they were still running like VAX mini computers and stuff like that. So like all of us have to deal with like code that was written before us. And what you want to do, like when you're in that situation, you want to, especially in mobile, is you want to have a way that you could like upgrade things. You don't want to be stuck. And
Yeah.
if you have to like, do everything at once, if you have to boil the whole ocean, if you have to eat the whole elephant at one time, that feels like you might as well just not get started. So like, I love telling the story of someone like, our app is really complex. We have these very special considerations. I'm not sure how we're gonna get this in here. And I'm like, actually, like, I don't want to ever tell anybody it's like something's easy
Yeah.
because like, like every app has complexities, but like just the fact that it's smaller means that you can actually do this. Like any app can really do this and get something out of it. And there's no downside to just getting the Expo package installed. Like it's not
Yeah.
gonna. We have a doc up somewhere that's like what's the size too, and it's like a couple like tens of kilobytes, something like that. I can't remember the exact number, but it's not even
Yeah, the size
make your app bigger.
comparably the same, I would say. I mean, I did ask my team to sort of run a very small analysis of the bundle size, the binary size before and after the migration, and also the number of dependencies. And eventually, I was sort of debating whether to put the number on the case study or not, because it's not like 5x some kind of improvement. But I think it's actually a good thing as well that the binary size stayed almost the same, like just like 1 megabyte of a difference this way or the other. When the app is like 50, I don't think that's a big deal. The number of dependencies from the node modules kind of the same as well. Um, so generally speaking, considering that, I think that's huge. Um, yeah,
Developers who are worried about like production stability or they have a large team and are worried about like not disrupting their team's processes. We just love those things where you can make a small change and have that change make a big difference.
yeah,
And I feels like what a lot of these steps are is like change a little bit here, and now I unlock a whole new capability. That's like a really exciting, and not just a story to tell, but it's an exciting story as a developer to live through because it
yeah.
feels like you can make big changes while the ship is still moving.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a perfect wrap up. Keith, it was amazing to have you. We ran over time. Typically, we do it for an hour, but I was having really great time going through it and asking questions together with the chat. I think you did a very nice breakdown of the whole Expo ecosystem, especially with the diagram. I love how you have those staged pull requests showing everything, the process. I think this is really useful. And overall, I'm just super excited for all the great work that you and the whole team are doing to make our lives easier, to make the development of mobile and universal apps easier. So that's really amazing. So yeah, I really had a great time.
Me
Wanted to
too.
thank you
I
for
mean,
that.
once I get going about Expo upgrades, I'm just like, I lose track of time.
Yeah,
So it was awesome talking about it. I really appreciate your insights all into the experience of working with development teams living this through. The more feedback, we always get feedback from there on how to make it better, but hearing how it's gone for folks too is often affirming like where we are on the right track and where we can improve. So really appreciate that perspective.
yeah. Thanks so much. I mean, my pleasure. And as we see more and more migrations to Expo coming up every month, that's really an interesting market response as well. Um, and yeah, I think generally I'm just very excited about those migrations. I mean, used to be skeptical about it as well back in the day. These days, I'm sort of using Expo almost full time for all the projects every once in a while. But yeah, that was fun. That was fun. Hopefully you'll join us someday in the future as well. As soon as I find a great topic to cover, we got a lot, so
Absolutely.
we'll
Anytime.
see. But yeah, with that in mind, I'll say thanks Keith again, and thanks to everybody watching, and I'll say that this recording will be published on the website. We'll collect all the materials, links, and references as well. So if you follow me on Twitter, Keith, are you on Twitter? Because I cannot seem to find you.
I am on Twitter. Don't look up my name because it's wrong. There's an old account. I can't get Twitter to
Please
delete, but
share it with me later, because I
yeah,
just
yeah.
cannot.
My name is Llama Lover, LUVR. So long story why I got there. If you DM me, I'll explain it on Twitter.
Was
I'm
it
also
before? Was it before the Llama CPP and Llama models from Meta?
way before that. This
Yeah.
was like SimCity 2000, Jimmy Neutron, Llama.
I see. It just cool. Thanks. Yeah. Drop me the name because I cannot tag you for some reason, which is insane. I love to tag everybody.
Yeah,
So yeah, we'll put it on the website. We'll share the links. Go follow Keith as well, obviously. Expo. You can also follow me. I will be happy to. But that said, I wanted to thanks everybody once again for joining us, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
thank you. Great talking to you.
Thank you.